Hello, and welcome to another day of Living with Spina Bifida. Today is Mental Health Monday, and I am going to be answering a question from a viewer. They wanted to know, when did I start realizing that I had borderline personality disorder? And how long have I been living with this mental illness? I'm just going to give you a quick reminder / overview of what borderline personality disorder is, in case you missed it before or you just forgot. Borderline personality disorder is a serious mental illness. It centers on the inability to manage emotions effectively. The disorder occurs in the context of relationships. Sometimes all relationships are affected, sometimes only one or two. It usually begins during adolescence or early adulthood. While some persons with borderline personality disorder are high functioning in certain settings, their personal lives may be in turmoil. Most people who have borderline personality disorder suffer from problems regulating their emotions and thoughts, impulsive and sometimes reckless behavior, and unstable relationships. Other disorders such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, substance abuse, and other personality disorders can often exist alongside borderline personality disorder. So, when did I start realizing that I had borderline personality disorder? I'd say probably around 16. Starting in my teenage years, I started really getting into mental health as a topic, as a hobby, as an interest. I was really interested in the history of mental institutions, the way people with mental health issues were treated, and how they were treated throughout history. It was just something that I was interested in. And along the way, I started realizing that the issues that I was dealing with were very similar to certain mental illnesses. With my own research, I started getting the idea that I could possibly have something called borderline personality disorder. Now, when I was a young child, 6 or 7, I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and oppositional defiance disorder. So I dealt with that my entire childhood, and as I got to become a teenager, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. So I was dealing with ADHD, ODD, depression, anxiety, self-harm, but I was never truly diagnosed as having borderline personality disorder as a child or teenager. But looking back now, being 30, it is rather obvious that I have been living with this mental illness since at least 9 or 10, I would say. Just with everything that I remember from my childhood, how difficult it was, how out of control I was from childhood until now, really, in some way or another. But I wasn't truly diagnosed until I was 23 or 24. I actually was told by a psychiatrist that I had borderline personality disorder. Though a doctor did not tell me that I had been living with this most of my life, I most likely was, just by all the memories and all the evidence that I have of myself. Because like I have said many times before, it is a very difficult disorder to diagnose, and it is even harder to control, harder to maintain, either with treatment, therapy, medication, all of the above. A lot of people end up self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, and they just totally ruin their lives because they're not properly treated. And a lot of doctors still don't understand the disorder properly. So a lot of people live their entire lives suffering because they don't understand themselves, doctors don't understand them, they look at them as a lost cause, and they just really don't know how to help them. But luckily for me, as the years go on, and as I have heard, as you get older, the symptoms and the issues that you have with borderline personality disorder kind of simmer down a little bit. As you get older, maybe it's part of maturing, I don't know. but it gets easier to live with compared to my teenage years. I was self-harming constantly. I was stealing from my family, my friends, where I worked, drinking, doing drugs. I was promiscuous. I was having unprotected sex with people I hardly knew. And as I got into my adult life, my early 20s, I was still self-harming, and my anger and my rage grew. It was a constant battle. Every day I was having what I call outbursts. Depending on the situation, I would just pretty much black out, and a lot of times I don't even remember what I said, but when I do remember it, I was out of control. I knew what was happening. I knew it was like I was watching myself from the outside. I could hear myself. I knew this was wrong, but I couldn't stop. Somebody else had control over me, is what it was like. My family, my friends, my husband. I would say the most regrettable, horrible, terrible things to them. I have told everyone and anyone I know that they were useless, they were no good, they should kill themselves, I'm going to kill them. All really terrible things have been said to pretty much everyone I know. And there was nothing I could do about it except regret it and hate it and never forget it to this day. And really the anger and the outbursts, it was snap. It didn't matter what it was. It could be something completely ridiculous as getting the wrong bag of chips, or I was feeling judged or mistreated, and that wasn't the case. I felt treated badly. I would just snap and just start yelling and screaming and crying, basically throwing tantrums like a 3-year-old, but I was a grown adult, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't control myself. It just was something that I did on a daily basis. For years, I had anger outbursts. I had fits. I had control issues. I had spending issues. I had drinking and drug issues. I was self-harming. I was eating as a form of self-medication, I guess. And I was just not treating myself properly for years. Throughout my whole 20s, I was just a wreck. I would say late 20s to within the last 3 years, I have greatly improved myself. I've found a medication that works amazingly. I don't gain any weight with this. I'm able to control that, and if I do gain weight, that is my own doing, and I need to get that under control. But the biggest thing is my outbursts, my anger, my fits, whatever you want to call them. They are kept to a very, very dull minimum. They don't happen hardly at all. Maybe once a month. Sometimes I can go several months without having any issues. Of course, I yell and scream a lot still, but I could say it's a reasonable amount. It's a normal person yelling and screaming. Just because people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing around the house. They're not listening. I finally have gotten to a place where it's doable, it's reasonable, and I can live with it. Sure, the depression is still there. I still struggle with self-hatred. I still struggle with self-image. I still struggle to keep those demons and bad thoughts away. But I have found a even ground to where I can just live life as a person who has borderline personality disorder. I have a mental illness, but it doesn't have me.